Oh, 12:02 now. If we want to get started with some quick introductions with who's here, and then anyone else who comes in, we'll just kind of let them just kind of roll in, listen to this. They can send an introduction through the chat, but this is how we normally get it started. So I will start. My name is Rachel Adams, and I am the marketing and events coordinator at Startup Zone. I'm super excited. I've learned about Tranquility from Joel and Alyssa in a call that I had with them, but I'm super excited for you folks to be able to hear about them as well, and for us to be able to send this video out to our companies after, because our Startup Zone companies are going to get some pretty cool benefits, which would be nice. But yeah, I think online CBT is something very new, and especially for PEI, where it's very hard to access in person. I think it's definitely a great resource, and I'm excited to hear a bit more about it. Yeah, for the rest of the introductions, Tracy, I see you're eating, and I'm not going to make you talk.
No, I'm good.
Okay, you're good? All right.
Yeah, so my name's Tracy Lynn Ellsworth. I work for BBBS PEI in the youth area. I run programs for youth that are facing barriers in life. I think I've taken about every webinar that Startup Zone has offered, which is great because it not only helps me, but it helps me look at things and what I can add to my programs to better help the youth I'm working with. So this has been a fantastic opportunity for me to learn more about what's out there and how to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us again, Tracy Lynn. Redden, I don't know if you're at your desk over there. Oh yeah, I see a bit of his head. Redden, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I'm Redden. I'm the services coordinator over at the Startup Zone, and I run my own freelance videography thing on the side. Really excited to hear from you guys today and all the cool stuff you're doing.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Redden. Red and I are both at the Startup Zone right now. We're just kind of sitting across from each other.
I was going to say, you're like looking over to the side.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm very excited for today. Hopefully we get a few more people to kind of pop in throughout. But yeah, otherwise it'll be a pretty laid back conversation. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And yeah, I'm just excited to hear a bit more about what you guys have to offer. So I'll let you folks take it away.
I'll let Joel introduce himself first, because then I've got some slides that have some information about me too. So
yeah, perfect. So I'm Joel. I'm the CEO. I'm actually a former stock analyst. So I take care of more of all the business things on the Tranquility side, and then obviously, I guess I'm also an expert in anxiety and depression in the sense that I've lived with it all my life. But I'm not a clinician. That's why Alyssa's here. So she's going to be taking care of most of the presentation. She has some great advice about how to deal with stress and anxiety during these times. And then if anyone is listening to this recording, at the end, we'll get to the point where we talk about Tranquility, and that will be offered to all Startup Zone members for free for the next 3 months. And it doesn't mean that you only have 3 months. If you sign up within the next 3 months, you will have it available to you actually for like a year. You'd have 6 months of coaching, and 6 months after the coaching of still having the software. And Rachel will be sharing some information via email on kind of how to sign up for that. And we'll mention it at the end of the slide, but just in case someone is just watching the first couple minutes and then they say, I'm out, I just want to see how to sign up, then skip to the end or ask Rachel, or I'll pass it off to Alyssa now, and she'll give you some tips and strategies and talk about how Tranquility can help you as well.
Sounds good. Thanks. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Hopefully this works. It should. Yep. Everybody see it? It's good. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, we're going to talk just kind of generally about stress and anxiety during the pandemic and some tips. And then we'll talk more specifically about anxiety and depression and resources, including Tranquility. So just a bit about me. I'm the co-founder and senior scientific director at Tranquility. And I'm also a senior instructor at Dalhousie University. So my main job is actually at Dalhousie, teaching in the clinical psychology program. Yeah, I have my education and credentials up there, but you can read those. I went to St. FX a long time ago, and then went off to Calgary to do my PhD, and then came home to Nova Scotia. So, I mean, I don't have to go into a lot of detail here. As everybody knows, these are really difficult and unprecedented times. So, what does that mean? It means some people are more stressed and anxious than others. Some are actually pretty resilient during these times and kind of thriving during these times. But most of us, at least, are feeling some stress at some point, whether that's due to social isolation, whether that's due to work stress, whether that's because we don't feel like we can be present at home or at work, or that we're not as productive as we'd like to be, or that we have other responsibilities like childcare, or maybe you have elderly parents, or whatever it is. We all have our own lives outside of work, and so this kind of working from home, and for some people they're used to that, for some people it's a new thing. So all of that combined makes it that for most of us there's some stress, but for others it may be that they're already feeling pretty anxious and that they already have significant issues with anxiety or depression, and all of these things are an added layer on top of that. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of managing those kind of day-to-day uh, stressors that we all can be feeling. And then, as I said, we'll talk a bit more about what to do if it's more than just that day-to-day stuff that we're all feeling right now.
Alyssa, may I ask you a question, please?
Absolutely.
Would you be able to send out your slides upon completion of this webinar? Just, it's
Yeah.
great information. I want to pay attention without having to jot
Yeah,
everything down.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, you know what? And I think we actually, not just the presentation, but a lot of the tips I'm going to be talking about, we have a handout, a PDF handout that has even more kind of details about some of these things. So we can send that out as well. So tips for managing stress. So this is where I'm talking about that kind of general stress we're all feeling. What we know is that to feel kind of well, we need some type of enjoyment in our lives. We need to feel like we are achieving something, or um, being successful is something. Um, I'll get to this, but that doesn't have to be, learning a new language. When I say achievement, that could be actually finished something on my checklist today, or I did the laundry. It just means something that makes us feel like, okay, I accomplished something today. That's what I mean there. Plus social connection. So these are what we know contribute to feeling well. And as you can imagine, these are all things that people are struggling a bit with, or a lot with, during the pandemic. Because things that we used to do, that we used to enjoy, a lot of that may have involved other people, getting out of the house. And so one tip is to find some things that you enjoy to do that you can still do during the pandemic. It might mean tweaking stuff that you used to do, so maybe it's that you used to go to the gym, so maybe you can't do that. So what can you do instead? What's something that you can do that would replace that, but still have that same kind of feeling to it? Or it might be, reading a book. Maybe you like to read, and so you can find some time to do that. Or going for a walk. I'm guessing that's even easier in PEI than here in Nova Scotia. I know you have less restrictions than we do these days, so that's good. But even here in Nova Scotia, we can go to the parks and go for a walk. So if that's something you enjoy doing, doing that can be really important too. And then, as I said, achievement, that's just finding something that you feel like, and it might not even be doing anything extra. It might just be at the end of the day, kind of taking stock of your day and being like, okay, yeah, I did that. Or like, if you have a to-do list, like one thing on that to-do list that you get done that day. Because it's really important to make sure you don't mistake this for that kind of need to be productive. We have been bombarded a little bit in our social media with these, rich and famous people that think it's, there's so much free time. Let's learn a new language or learn how to cook, or, must be nice, right? So that's not what I mean in terms of achievement. This isn't like add something else on top of everything else you're doing. it's recognizing and acknowledging yourself for the things that you are getting done during this time, because we aren't going to be as productive as we were outside of the pandemic. That's just a fact, right? So the people that are kind of doing all those new things, and if you are, that's great, but only if that's like because you want to, not because you're feeling pressure that you have to. If it's this pressure from outside that you have to kind of do all these things, paint your apartment or whatever, like all these new things, that's actually not going to contribute to your wellness. It's more like I've really wanted to do this, and I actually do have the time, so I'm going to take that time and do this thing. Then it can help. And then social connection, right? Again, whatever way you can do that, whether that's, now that you can have a bubble, I forget if PEI's got bubbles. I think their bubbles might be bigger than ours. Or if it's, still doing Zoom with friends or texting with friends or whatever it is, it can get easy to kind of get caught up with the day to day. When it used to be, right, that you would make plans with someone and you'd go out and do something that was built into our schedules, or maybe you'd go out after work or whatever it was. So it's making sure to still build those things in. And I think that's an important piece, is building it in, because it's like our days can kind of drift from one day to the next and not feel any different, and just kind of feel like you're going through the motions. And so kind of almost having a bit of a list at your fingertips for things that you might want to do for fun or enjoyment, things that you might want to accomplish, and social connection, and really kind of scheduling those things into your day, and treating them just like any other appointment or meeting like this, right? So it's supposed, I said I was going to read my book. I'm going to do that Tuesday after work at 5:00. And if something comes up and you can't do it at that time, then reschedule it just like any other appointment or meeting, because these things are important too. Okay.
Hi, sorry. You just talked about building in time for social connections.
Yeah.
So the longer this seems to be, like, I know within the first month, even 6 weeks, even myself, you were very motivated to work at home, to do this, to keep those connections up. I'm now finding even myself, by the time I'm done of work for the day, I don't want to connect. I have become so disconnected from social connections because I'm frustrated. I've lost that motivation. So how can you work on that? Or it's same with youth, who have been socially isolated. This is the period in their time where they make those connections. They need those interactions.
Yeah.
And they're not getting them, so they've kind of lost all motivation for this, or most motivation. What would your suggestion be to people like myself or youth who are really struggling at the end of a day or throughout the day to make that a priority when you just really don't want to anymore?
Yeah. So what's interesting is motivation is not something that kind of magically happens, right? That's the thing that's difficult with you. If you're lacking motivation, then it's kind of like, well, how do you get that motivation? And so part of getting that motivation is planning something small, right? So breaking it down, right? So definitely scheduling it, right? So even if you don't feel like it, most people will tell you if it's something that they at least used to enjoy, or it's seeing a friend, it's something social, that even if they don't feel like doing it, if they schedule it in and they kind of commit to doing it and they do it, they might not feel great, but they feel better, right? It definitely didn't make them feel worse, and that starts to increase the motivation, right? If you actually do it, and you feel like, okay, that wasn't so bad, or that was actually kind of pleasant, right? That was decent. I got to see my friends. That was great. Then it motivates you to do it again. So I think scheduling it in and also breaking it down. So not feeling like, doesn't have to be a 2-hour long Zoom call with your friends, right? Like it could be, I'm gonna text with you tonight. Is it okay if at 6:00 or whatever, just for a few minutes, we'll schedule in some text time. Doesn't all have to be face to face. That's part of it too, right? Some of us are pretty zoomed out, right? So use a different modality, right? Maybe text instead. Doesn't always have to be the same system. and acknowledge that it's not going to be the same, right? That it's okay. And if you know, if it's with a good friend, you know, be honest about that and chat with them about it, right? Like, I'm feeling kind of not so motivated to do social things, but I know, you know, I do miss you and I really want to hang out with you. So can we do it a bit differently this time so that maybe, well, you know, the last few times we chatted for an hour, but maybe this time we just do it for 15 minutes. I'm making that up, but that's the kind of
I
thing.
understand.
Yeah. So, and that's part of it too. That comes down to the last one here, which I can talk about now, like self-compassion. Like that also comes to acknowledging that this is a difficult time, even if you're still working and you've still got your income coming in, and you know things are relaxing a bit, so maybe you can get out a bit more. It's normal to still feel stressed, right? There's even all this new research coming out that doing Zoom calls all day is actually more exhausting than in-person meetings. So that's just a fact. Doesn't mean we can decrease our Zoom meetings all day, but it means that we can acknowledge that if we're feeling exhausted at the end of the day, so is everybody else, right? That's normal. Because sometimes we feel like, why am I feeling so exhausted, or why don't I want to talk to my friends today? And sometimes just acknowledging that, you know, we've been saying this a lot in Nova Scotia, right? We're in this together, but it's actually true, right? We're all feeling it somewhat differently, but acknowledging that it's normal to feel exhausted, even if you've had a good day. And if you've had a bad day, acknowledging that that's okay too, that we all have bad days. And then in terms of self-compassion, so once you've kind of acknowledged that, okay, so I had a bad day or I'm feeling exhausted, and that's okay because we're in the middle of a pandemic or whatever it is then I always find one of the tips, again, there's lots of work on self-compassion, but a quick tip is to ask yourself what you would tell a friend, because we are much more compassionate and kind towards our friends than we are to ourselves. You know, friend, family member, whatever it is. So just as an example, like we've been talking about, maybe you feel exhausted at the end of the day. Some of your self-talk, right, your thoughts you might say to yourself are going to be quite different than what if a friend called you up and said, oh, hey, Joel, I'm feeling really exhausted today, and I guess I don't know, it must just be me. I must be lazy. Everybody else seems to be able to do these Zoom calls and be fine and get out and go for a run after, and I'm just, I don't know, I guess, yeah, it's all, there's nothing I can do. Would you say to your friend, like, yeah, you're pretty lazy, I don't know why you can't do it? Right? Of course not. I hope not. But right. So what would you say to a friend? Right? Would you say like, oh, you know what, man, we're all doing what we can, right? We're doing the best we can. Yeah, I get you. It's really tiring to do these all day long, right? Those are the things you're going to say to a friend. And so when you notice yourself if you notice yourself kind of beating yourself up a bit, turn that around, and what would you say to a friend? Quickly, a couple more tips for managing stress. One is the next two are both kind of similar. They're very different strategies, but they're for similar reasons. And for everybody, that's why I'm just throwing out a few tips, because for everybody it's a bit different what they like. So the first one is what I and many other people call worry time. So if you are finding yourself kind of thinking and worrying a lot about anything really, but in this time it might be something to do with the pandemic, right? Like, when's this gonna end? Am I gonna be able to see my parents? Or, you know, all those things that you might be thinking about, and maybe it's distracting you from, you know, work or whatever. It sounds kind of silly, but if you can kind of say like, okay, I'm gonna allow myself worry time at, you know, 5:30 every day. I'm gonna give myself 15 minutes to just think about all these worries, and whatever happens, happens. But that's when I get to worry. So when I notice a worry, I can jot it down and say, I'm going to worry about this during worry time. And for some people, as I said, that's easier said than done, but often people, especially if they write it down, can then get back to the task that they're going to be supposed to be doing or want to be doing. And what's interesting is when you get to worry time, you definitely give yourself that permission. If you need to take those worries and think about them for those 15 minutes, go for it. Many people will tell you that when they actually get to the worry time, they don't need the full 15 minutes. They kind of go through their list and then they kind of go, okay. That said, don't do it right before bed. Because if you read your worry list right before bed, then you're just going to be lying in bed with your worry list. So that's why I always say, sometime near the end of the day, but not before bed. And the last one is mindfulness. And when I say mindfulness, some people kind of roll their eyes. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I don't mean mindful meditation. If that's something you do, if you are someone who enjoys meditation and that kind of practice, by all means, go for it. That is definitely helpful for your stress. Things like yoga, all those different activities that include mindfulness can be helpful. But mindfulness doesn't have to be that. It can be a short activity that just kind of brings you back to the present moment. So again, that's why I said that worry time and mindfulness can be for the same purpose. So this is, again, when maybe you're feeling overwhelmed or your thoughts just are getting carried away. You can take a few moments to just focus on the present. And that can be through your 5 senses, right? So just take a moment. What do you see around you? What do you hear? Maybe what are you tasting? You can be mindful of what you're eating, right? And really kind of focus on the flavors and the texture and that kind of thing. You can focus on, if you're going for a walk, really paying attention to what's the temperature of the air, what are the colors all around me, do I hear any birds chirping or whatever it is. So as you can see, mindfulness doesn't have to be an hour-long meditation session. It can just be wherever you are in whatever moment, bringing yourself back to the present and just kind of focusing on what's going on. Any more questions about those? I can certainly do a Q&A at the end too. All right. Oh. All right, so just to give you kind of a bit more background, I mentioned at the beginning, right, that some people are experiencing clinically significant levels of anxiety and depression. So what do I mean by that? Whereas we can all get stressed and anxious sometimes, for some people that anxiety gets in the way in a significant way with their daily functioning, whether that's they can't get work done, and again, not the productivity I'm talking about. They really, it impacts their work in a significant way. It impacts their relationships. They really kind of stop reaching out at all. They avoid things. So when we talk about clinically significant, that's what that means. It means it's distressing to a level that it really gets in the way. And so we know that prior to the pandemic, anxiety and mood disorders were already quite common, right? So, 1 in 5 people experiences a mental illness, of which anxiety and depression are the most common. And so if you take someone who either was already experiencing anxiety and depression, or someone that is vulnerable or prone to having anxiety and depression. So for some people, things were going okay until the pandemic, but maybe they have had depression and anxiety in their past. And then you add this kind of social isolation, loneliness, decreased productivity, all those things, worries about what's going to happen in the future, on top of that kind of vulnerability, right? If they were already prone to having depressive episodes, for example, then certainly something like the pandemic can trigger or worsen if they're already experiencing those symptoms. So if you feel like you can't be productive, you feel like you're not getting that social time, then that can certainly trigger significant anxiety and depression. So again, we'll send these out. So these are just some resources. There's so much out there, as everybody knows, about what people can do. So some of the tips that I'm talking about today are on these websites. So the first one is CAMH, which is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. So it's kind of the biggest research and clinical center for mental health and addictions in Canada. CMHA, so the Canadian Mental Health Association, which this is the broad one, but there's also a Nova Scotia and PEI branch. I think they're separate. I'm fairly certain they're separate. And then fact sheets from the Canadian Psychological Association. So again, these are just additional resources for mental health and addictions specific to COVID. So now, what are we all about? So Tranquility Online is a digital cognitive behavior therapy. So I'll talk about what cognitive behavior therapy is in a second, just to give you a better sense. But the idea behind Tranquility is that it's based in evidence, it's timely, it's at your fingertips, it's stigma-free, it's personal, and it's accessible. So it's based on cognitive behavior therapy. So for anybody who's not heard of cognitive behavior therapy, we call it CBT for short. And the cognitive is just a fancy word for thoughts. So CBT is about that. The main kind of premise from CBT is that what we think and what we do impacts how we feel, and how we feel impacts how we think and what we do. They all work together. And I don't know if anybody here has experienced anxiety, for example. When we talk about feelings, it can be hard to directly target them. You know, if somebody says like, "Oh, just don't worry about that," well, that's easier said than done. How do you not worry about it? Well, that's what targeting the thoughts and the behavior does. So helping you think more realistically, come up with some kind of balanced ways of thinking, because people who are anxious tend to kind of catastrophize or assume the worst. So helping kind of balance those thinking. Similar with depression, people tend to think pretty negatively about themselves, the world around them, and they can be pretty kind of extreme in that thinking. And so helping balance those thoughts. So that's a whole skill, yeah.
With this Tranquility Online for CBT, what is the success rate? I know CBT is highly successful, but I've only really read about it and experienced it in face-to-face therapies, whether it's group or one-on-one. So how does that work really, one, online, and two, what is there any statistics or rates of success for this online?
Yeah, so great question. I don't have that off the top of my head in terms of exact rates of success, although I don't have it for, no, it's okay. I don't have it for individual either. I just don't know the exact success rates. I know that it's between 60 and 80% for anxiety disorders. And I know that internet-based cognitive behavior therapy for mild to moderate anxiety disorders and mild to moderate depression has been shown to be as effective as face-to-face.
Perfect.
So so I can tell you that. We have some data on Tranquility that I'll show you in a couple minutes. We did a pilot study that I can show you. And so, yeah, I mean, the Tranquility is based on the gold standard CBT, as you said. We've got like 40 years of research on it, but in those 40 years, in the last kind of 20, we've been studying. Before kind of internet, we also studied self-help. So you'll see the way Tranquility is set up is that it's a platform that you can go through session by session on your own. And then we also have coaching, which I'll tell you about. So there's also kind of a decade worth of research showing that for mild to moderate problems, self-help can help. Used to be books. I'm old enough to remember the research on books. Now it's on web-based cognitive behavior therapy. So I think that might actually be, yeah. So, so we have developed Tranquility. So you notice I don't call it an app. We don't call it an app. It's a platform. It's a program, because it's more than just an app. It has 9 session that, if we have time, Joel can show you. And as I said, it can be done as self-help. So you can go through the sessions and learn the skills. It's a skill building program. That's what it's all about. That's what CBT is all about. Even when I do it face to face, I tell people my job is to make it so you don't need me anymore. It's really about providing people with the skills that they need to manage their anxiety and depression. And once you have those skills, once you practice, it's a lot of work. I tell people that, you know, it's not just about reading the material online. It's about really understanding it and practicing it using the tools that we provide within the platform. What we know, though, is that although self-help works, particularly, well, I guess all self-help, but particularly we know in the research with internet-based CBT, that the dropout rates can be as high as 90%, because we see it as similar to having a personal trainer at the gym, or, you know, signing up for Weight Watchers. We all know what we're supposed to do at the gym, but having a personal trainer actually walk you through it and tell you what, you know, the actual skills of how to do it, and then having someone you're accountable to, like, oh, did you go this week, can be really helpful. So this is what our coaching is about. They're there for support. They're there to keep you motivated. They're there to troubleshoot if there's something going on with the program that you don't understand. And they can be available to you through video, phone, or in-app messaging. So and you can talk with your coach up to 30 minutes a week. And if you don't need them, that's fine too. But that's what they're there for. Oh yeah, so here's just some of our, we did a pilot study, and we have a number of different information data that we could talk about if anybody's interested. But this is kind of it's an anxiety program. So this is the kind of bulk of it, which is people that we worked with in the pilot study, as you can see here, started with their anxiety ratings in the moderate range. So these are both standardized anxiety scales that basically give you a number that puts you in the mild, moderate, well, normal or not clinically significant range, mild, moderate, or severe range. So you can see here that our clients started in the moderate range of anxiety, meaning it was significant enough for them. If they went into their doctor, for example, and did this questionnaire, which people do, their doctor would say, your anxiety is significant enough that I think you need, probably, they might say medication, although we know that CBT is actually more effective for mild to moderate anxiety than depression is, or than medication is. And then you can see that as long as they did 3 or more of our modules, by the end, their anxiety had dropped to no longer being clinically significant. So meaning at that point, if they went in to talk to their doctor and said, I think I'm having some anxiety, and told them about it, their doctor would say, no, you know what? Like, we all feel anxious sometimes. It sounds like you've got a good handle on it. All right. So questions before we do a bit more, talk about what else. Does anybody have any questions? Joel, did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to mention maybe, because I'm not sure if we will have a time for demo. So if we don't, I just want to mention maybe a bit more about what the program looks like and how it works. So as Alyssa alluded to, essentially, there's 9 sessions, or we call them modules. Each of them take about a half hour to do. The first one's a little longer just because it's kind of a bit of a kickoff. And the idea is, just like if you were seeing someone person to person, like a lot of people have like weekly sessions. So what we say is, we would suggest that you try to do 1 session a week. So there's 9. So you could finish the program within 9 weeks. You probably want to give yourself at least 12 to be like realistic, because life happens. Also, some of the work sometimes might take a bit more than a week. So we said, you know, you can do this program in 12 weeks, and that's kind of pretty typical of a CBT session that you would hire a psychologist to do with you. And then, so there's 9 sessions, and then, but the magic really happens by you doing the work in between the sessions, which is why once you start going through the sessions, we will unlock 4 different interactive tools for the clients to use. And that's just a tool that helps you do your homework. So the tools are either helping you train yourself based on what we've already taught you to start, changing your automatic negative thoughts into more rational, balanced thoughts, and to change a lot of your avoidant behaviors that are things that you're not doing anymore because your anxiety is like stopping you from doing it, or almost convincing you not to do it because it feels safer not to do it, and then getting you to do those things. So we have essentially nine sessions, 4 tools that you can access through either your phone or your computer, and then you get matched with a coach, and your coach is available to you, like basically like unlimited amount of text messaging, it's in-app messaging, so it's in the app, as well as you can schedule a 30-minute phone call or Zoom call once a week with your coach. So we're pretty much providing you with kind of everything you would need to kind of get all the skills and the knowledge that traditional CBT provides, with additional things like that you wouldn't really get. So the tools, like I said, are interactive. Some of them include notifications that help you stay on track. As you can see from this picture here, there's a chart. So every 7 days, we actually ask the standardized anxiety survey, so you and your coach can kind of keep track of your anxiety levels. And the great thing is that for the next 3 months, we're doing a pilot with Startup Zone, so anyone who's a member can sign up for free, and you'll get matched with a coach, and you can kind of start, and we're happy to provide this to your the founders and the people working in the startups. And I guess if there's any other questions, we're definitely ready to handle those now.
Where do your coaches come from, and what are their backgrounds and certifications?
Good question. So we get asked that every time. So the
I kind of feel bad. I'm like throwing it out there.
You're not a plant. So they, most of them have a background in so some type of bachelor degree or community college diploma in something like psychology or social work or occupational therapy or some kind of helping professional background. Yeah. They're not registered therapists, though. They're not registered psychologists or registered social workers, or so they're paraprofessionals that we have trained in motivational interviewing and the platform and how it works, including the CBT in terms of being able to help people troubleshoot and things like that. Because their role is really there for more of a support. So similar to, a coach in other ways, they're not there to be therapists. The platform and program itself is the therapy. They're there to help keep you motivated, accountability, as well as support, right? People often like someone there to talk to and guide them through if they have questions. And they're also, I should say, they're also, so they're trained by us and they're also monitored by us, right? So we on a regular basis are consulting with them, myself and another psychologist.
And are they located in Atlantic Canada, throughout Canada, or all over the world? Like, where are they?
Sure. Right now, they're just in Nova Scotia.
Just in Nova Scotia.
Yeah. But, we've talked to, if we were to do more work in PEI, we're happy to hire people in PEI. It's one of those things where, and that's the nice thing, because they're not registered professionals, they could be anywhere. So right now, they're just in Nova Scotia, but where we did all our training for the last 8 coaches during the pandemic, so we can do it online. So they could be from anywhere, but right now they're just no.
And I'm sorry. I just maybe you can mention the research behind coaching versus therapist for ICBT.
Yeah, sure. So there's a few reasons we chose coaches versus registered therapists. So the research shows that coaches can be as effective, if not actually more effective, in providing good outcomes for ICBT. There's some different reasons why that might be. So for sure they can provide the same, at least the same outcomes, but why sometimes they're coming out better is because they're trained in this platform, right? This is what they do. And so they stick to kind of the role of that support and not trying to be the therapist. As a psychologist myself, right, I can say sometimes it's pretty easy to slip into trying to do the therapy, but of course you can't do that in 15, 20 minutes. And so that's one possibility of why it's actually better, is because they stick to that role. And there was another piece I was going to say. I already forgot.
Well, I mean, in terms of the therapy, like I said, the research shows that coaching can be more effective. The other thing is, like, as a startup, as a business, it gives us more flexibility that, if we have a client tomorrow that says, I'm in Ontario, can you start next week? It would take us 2 months to find registered therapists and everyone in Ontario. But today we can just go, yeah, we have coaches ready to go, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So, and then it helps us keep the cost down too, so that we can just be more scalable and help more people.
And you had mentioned, Alyssa, that your coaches are available for some text messaging as well as a 15 to 30 minute call throughout the week. Would it be right to assume, or not right, maybe correct to assume, that these coaches are part-time individuals that work, or are they all full-time with caseloads?
So it's we have some that are full-time and some that are part-time. It really just, it kind of depends, and we'll have to manage that as our
need grows.
number. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Oh, what'd I do?
Probably. Well, it's okay. I don't think we did.
No, we're good.
Yeah, if there's no more questions, if there are no other questions, I think we do have time. I can do a very short demo of just showing you what the platform looks like.
Please.
Okay. Oh, I think host disabled attendee screen sharing. So.
Oh yeah, you have to switch it for me.
Yeah, so this is part of these new security features Zoom set out. So since I made you the host, Alyssa, now you have to make Joel the host.
Okay.
Or if
How
you
do
want,
I do
you make
that?
me the host and I can make Joel the host.
That's okay. Where do I do that?
Are you in gallery view right now?
Yeah.
If you hover over Joel, you should get 3 dots, and it should give you the option to make him the host.
There you go.
Okay.
Done.
Sweet.
Sweet.
Okay, so what I'm showing you here is actually a completely unlocked demo account. This is not what an account would look like the first time you log on, because as I mentioned, we only unlock these tools as you kind of learn about how to use them. So right now you can see there's 8 sessions here. You would start a session, and each session has these different parts. So it's kind of like, an online learning platform. For example, and session 1 is pretty simple. It's like, welcome to Tranquility. What is anxiety? What is CBT? And then creating SMART goals for the program. So just quickly to show you like what a session would look like. Part 1, we have this video. I won't play it, but we have this video that introduces Tranquility. It kind of tells you, like, these sessions take about 30 to 40 minutes. We suggest 1 a week. There's these 9 sessions, and then there's tools. So let's begin. We could kind of explain, what is anxiety. Then we would explain how anxiety works, which is really a fight, flight, or freeze response. And then I have put in these just nothing in these boxes because they're required fields, but we ask the client to describe their anxiety. For some people, this is the first time they're really thinking about these questions. It's important to note that anything a client writes in the platform, the coach can see. So a coach would find these answers extremely helpful, and they would review them before your first call, most likely. And then our anxiety program very much has been broken down into kind of the 4 more traditional types of anxiety. So we have social anxiety, we have specific phobias, we have panic disorder, which is some people who experience panic attacks. Then we have generalized anxiety, which is a lot more of just someone who's worrying a lot about about not something specific, but just about in general, a lot of different things. And then we've created these personas. So for example, Dylan experiences social anxiety. If you click on Dylan, there's more information. So the idea here is most likely a client will identify with 1 or 2 of the personas. And then as they go through the next 7 modules, they don't need to focus on all the examples. They can just focus on the ones that are more relevant to them, which is the one that's like you identify the most with. Every once in a while, we'll ask this very short quiz just to make sure the client is, paying attention and understanding. If they don't, maybe they want to go back. We're not grading anyone. It doesn't really matter. If you click the wrong answer, we actually just tell you what the right answer is. Then here's this is the anxiety scale that we ask. So this is the first time you'd be asked this. And then after this, every 7 days, we'll be asked it again. And that's how we populate that chart and how we get that data that Alyssa presented earlier to show the outcomes data. Then we explain what CBT is. I'm just going to quickly go through this because I like to show you guys some of the tools. Another quiz, another survey. This one's for mood. So although this is an anxiety program, if a lot of people who have anxiety also have depression or low mood, if you have low mood, we've also proven that this program would help you with your mood. But we're also working right now with a very large client, which is a health authority in Atlantic Canada, to build a depression program, and that should be ready by the end of August. Here's an example of these characters. So we've actually talked about what SMART goals are, and then we've given examples of SMART goals for each of the personas. So Dylan has social anxiety. His goal is, or he or she, I guess, I want to invite my 3 closest coworkers out for drinks after work on Friday 2 months from now. So that would kind of be the main goal for Dylan that he or she wants to work on for the program. And then at the end of each session, we have this last part, which the main skill that our coaches are trained in is called motivational interviewing. But we've also used that skill base inside our software to also help people stay motivated. So in the last part of session 1, we would ask someone what their SMART goal is. I won't write anything specific here, but then we ask them what the reason is, how confident are they, why didn't they choose a higher number. Then we ask them to think about potential barriers. They would write down the potential barriers and what they can do if those barriers come up. So they're planning ahead of time of what might stick them. Then they ask how confident they are to make this change. We ask them why did they choose that confidence rating, not a higher one, and then what would help to get even higher. This is another really good thing that the coach will review before a call with our clients to see how their motivation is and all that kind of thing. With only about 9 minutes left, an example of our thought journal is, let's pretend we had social anxiety and we had anxiety about doing a Zoom call. We could call it Zoom call. Zoom call. Again, this might look complicated, but we've actually taught the client in session 2 and session 3 how to do this. So you're seeing it for the first time. But if you are a client, the first time you see this, we would have already given you examples and explained how and why you're doing this. So the situation, I'm not going to write it out, but could be, I'm feeling really anxious about this Zoom call I have at 2 o'clock. And then, or that's the situation, is I have a Zoom call at 2 o'clock. The feelings are, I'm feeling anxious and maybe even considering to canceling it. And if I cancel it, I'm gonna feel stupid, or it could be a bunch of different emotions. You then rate your primary feeling, then you enter your automatic thoughts. So for a Zoom call, it could be, I'm afraid I'm going to embarrass myself. Whoops, oh my God. Embarrass myself like I'm doing right now. I think I still spelled that wrong. Embarrass myself. And what else could there be? I'm afraid people will notice I'm anxious, etc., etc. You hit continue. Then we've taught the client again about these thinking traps, which is thinking errors that people with anxiety traditionally kind of have issues with. So it could be mind reading, it could be I guess fortune telling, etc. Then you come up with creating a balanced thought. So you choose which thought is the most distressing to you, and you come up with evidence for. So you could say, there was that one time 2 years ago where I said that thing that people thought was maybe silly and everyone laughed at me, and I felt really embarrassed, and then my head got sweaty and I really felt like I wanted to run away. Like that could be evidence for. And evidence again could be, all the times that everything that didn't happen. Or even, you could even say, sometimes people laugh when I say something, but you could say, I'm not sure if they're laughing at me or with me. And, everyone typically likes me, so maybe it's not that they're laughing at me. Then the balanced thought is taking the evidence for, taking the evidence again, and then coming up with a believable thought. So Alyssa always says, CBT is not about positive thinking. It's about coming up with a new thought that is less distressing than the big hot thought, but that you can still believe, so that you're not wasting your time trying to convince yourself of something that's overly positive, because life isn't always overly positive. And you rewrite it, and hopefully it's gone from something that might have been an 8 or something to a 4. We hit complete, you get a record. And that's just, you. Once you do that several times, that's gonna essentially be the practice part, and then eventually, hopefully, it almost becomes automatic, where you call yourself out on some of the automatic thoughts. You go, I've done this before, I've thought about it, I'm now going to start believing my balanced thought more. The experiments and evidence tool also helps you with, again, believing it more. The last part, again, we only have 5 minutes, is just the example of the behavior part, which is called exposure therapy. So how that's going to work is, I've created an example here of someone who has a phobia of dogs. Their goal is, I want to be able to pet my neighbor's dog in 12 weeks. What they would do is come up with steps that are not overly distressing to the distressing kind of situation, and create a fear ladder, we call it. And you plan these activities, and you slowly work your way up until you've gotten to your goal. And the idea is to continuously put yourself in situations that are going to cause you some anxiety, so that you can learn that you can, number one, the anxiety is going to be temporary. Number two, you can handle it. And as you work your way up the ladder, you're building more and more confidence, to the point where it's going to be a lot less distressing when you actually have to do petting your neighbor's dog by the time you do it, because you've kind of had all this practice and you've learned that it's not going to be as distressing as you think. What's great about this, for example, for this tool, is you plan your exposure, you put in a date and time, And after the date and time, there's a notification, and then you can it asks you, did you do it, yes or no? You fill out more information. This helps you, this helps your coach. And yeah, in general, that's the program. I'll show you just one last thing, which is, this is what it looks like on desktop. If I squeeze the screen, this is what things would look like for you if you had it open on your phone. So it's a little different, but you still have the dashboard here, and then all the tools are on the side here. So with that, I think if there's one last question, I think we have time for one last question.
Oh, well, I have a couple.
Sure.
But they're quick questions.
Okay.
One, is there an age limit on this? So do you have to be 16 and older, 18 and older, or how does that work?
Yeah,
Good question.
yeah, for now, especially for the purposes of this promo code, you have to be an adult. There are situations where, so 18, sorry, to answer your question. There could be situations in the future where it could definitely be appropriate for even 15, 16, 17-year-olds, but probably we would ask them to be referred by someone else at that point.
Okay. Could you have this on two consoles? So could you potentially have it on your desktop and your phone at the same time?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a time allowed to complete? So if you were to start a session today, do you have to complete it today? Is there a time, like, do you have a week, or is it you kind of do it at your own rate? So it may take you 3 weeks to do one session, depending on if you're finding that session very hard.
Yeah. So again, for this promo code, you're actually going to get you're going to have a coach for 6 months. And and after that, you still have the software for another 6 months.
No, just in general, not with this code, but just in general.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, so yeah, because if anyone signed up online without the code, they would have to pay a monthly subscription. So as much as like, they can keep paying for it for as long as they want.
Okay. How much is the monthly subscription?
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to sign up outside of this, our typical price is $99 a month for the full coaching version, and then $59 a month for just the self-help. But at the moment, during the pandemic, we're actually cutting all our prices by 50%. We have a promo code that you'd be asked to use. And so right now it's half of what I just told you. Okay.
And last question, can you repeat sessions, or is it a one-time only thing?
Yeah. So once you've been on a session, it's always there for you. There's no restrictions.
Well, you had said that it's a monthly thing. So if I were to sign up, I'm paying monthly, and in 6 months I really want to review a session I did. Do I have to repay to review that session, or will I have access to those sessions?
In that case, you would actually have to, repay.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
I'm sorry.
I appreciate all of yours, Tracy.
No, that's great.
That's awesome. No, I'm really excited. I mean, I already learned all about it with Joel and Alyssa, and I'm very excited about it. I'm pretty involved in mental health initiatives myself. I'm a speaker for Jack.org, but I also have anxiety and depression myself. So I'm excited to check out Tranquility and everything it has to offer. But yeah, and I'm excited for our companies to have access to it. So if no one else has anything else, we'll wrap it up for now. But it's been a lot of fun learning a bit more about it, and I'm excited to kind of cut this video up and package it so we can send it out to the rest of our companies.
Great,
and of course, Tracy Lynn will keep you in on the loop too.
Yeah.
On most of your webinars, right? Like,
I expect you to be here at this point. Yeah.
If I missed one, you'd worry.
I would, yeah. Well, I like this little sense of community that we've made in our webinars. It's nice to know people are coming up. Yeah. Thanks again, Joel and Alyssa. I'm really excited for all this.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
Enjoy your hot day.